Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Okay, so today gonna read a bit from a new Luang Por Baen book that I started translating a little while ago, and followed by a sutta. And this is it's the first talk in this book called Path and Fruit, and I wanted to read it just because right now we're going through this Dhamma is for one who is given to energy, not for one who is lazy. So this is the ultimate super hardcore Thai forest tradition energy talk. But I have to give a bit of a preamble that only very certain people will be able to try this type of practice, and I'm being slightly hypocritical by reading this because I've never tried this kind of practice, but it's just sort of putting it out there. And if you're already someone who goes way over the top or is very tense, this may not be the thing you want to do. But if you're like me and you're given to laziness, sometimes this may help to make you slightly less lazy, at least. So anyway, that's the preamble, and then I'll temper it with some a very similar teaching from the suttas. So there's no page numbers or anything. It's just what it is. This chapter is called Virtue, the Path to an Excellent Life. Human beings are excellent beings. Us human beings have certain abilities and possess a unique brain. If we put forth the effort needed to harness this inheritance to the best of our ability, then all of us will be able to discern the supermundane qualities of Dhamma quite clearly. Without a doubt, these qualities will be self-evident. These are things which do exist, but our efforts are not up to the task, so we remain unable to open that which is closed. We remain unable to budge that which is stuck. It is possible to extract that which is embedded, but for now it is closed to us. It remains embedded just so. It remains obscure just so. If our only wish is for Nibbana, then we will achieve just that, a desire for Nibbana. No matter how bad we want it, if we don't remove the things which obscure Nibbana, then we won't get the opportunity to reach Nibbana. Indeed, the powerful tools of the defilements gain power in proportion to worldly progress. Thus, the defilements use these tools to draw the hearts and minds of all beings in the world under their sway. We cannot really estimate the total number of sentient beings in the world. We can, however, calculate the total number of human beings, because the world has shrunk. This planet is as big as ever, but worldly development has made it shrink. So we have a rough estimate of the total number of human beings. If we attempt to add on all other sentient beings, we cannot calculate how many there are. But it really doesn't matter just how many sentient beings there are in the world, as they all exist under the power of and in the grip of defilement. The defilements of beings are that powerful. Only the Lord Buddha and the Savaka Arahants were able to escape the power of the defilements. How come they were able to escape? It is because they put forth the effort and the energy. They had resolve. Striving, they really did it. In their Dhamma practice, they really practiced. They didn't just play around with the practice or do it as some sort of ceremony. They gave their very lives, never turning back. So we say, really do it. Do it for path, for fruit. Really go for the essence, for the source. When our teachers really did it for the essence, for the source, for the path, and for the fruit, then they reached that essence, source, path, and fruit, because they really did it for that reason and no other. Lungpo Gongma once told a story about a certain Tera, an elder, who was doing walking meditation. He was walking back and forth. In time, his feet got swollen. Eventually, they cracked and started bleeding. His feet bled until the walking path was covered in blood, but he didn't quit. It got to the point where he could no longer walk, so he started crawling. He wouldn't let himself quit. Why couldn't he just stop? Because he hadn't yet reached path and fruit. Because he did it for reaching path and fruit. He didn't do it for an appropriate amount of time, then stop. He didn't do it for an appropriate amount of time, then go lie down. He did it for path and fruit. As long as knowledge and vision of path and fruit hadn't appeared clearly to him, he wouldn't let himself quit. He did walking meditation until his feet were bleeding, and he wouldn't let himself quit. How could he quit? He hadn't yet reached path and fruit, so he continued by crawling. His knees bled and his hands bled, and still he wouldn't let himself quit. How could he quit? He didn't do this to injure his knees, and he didn't do it to injure his hands. He didn't do it to injure his feet, but he did it for path and fruit. In the end, he realized path and fruit thus, because he did it for the sake of path and fruit, and for no reason other than this. If all of us here practice like this, it is certain that we will all realize in the same way, because the path and the fruit exist within each and every one of us. It wasn't something exclusive to the Lord Buddha. It didn't exist only for the great Arhat disciples of the Buddha either. It exists within each and every one of us. If you really do it, you really get it. If the action is true, the result must be true. So, really do it. Get down to it. Dedicate yourself and get down to work like that Tera did, walking meditation until his feet were cracked and not quitting. His knees cracked and he didn't quit. His hands cracked and he didn't quit. In the end, he realized path and fruit in line with his aim, and thus his wishes were fulfilled. That's a talk from 8th of July, 1990. So again, just to say, we read these kind of talks for the sake of inspiration, and almost nobody's going to be able to practice like that. You have to be in a very specific, wholesome state of striving to really be able to do something like this and practice the way Luang Por Baen or Ajahn Mahabua or any of these practitioners. But I feel it's good to put it out there just to know that this kind of thing, this kind of striving has taken place in the Thai forest tradition, and that's kind of what defines it or what gives it its character. And then there's a quote in the next section, which I'll read before I get into this sutta. It's Luang Por Baen. Our duty as ordained people is to keep this mind and heart of ours far away from the issues of the world. All the issues of the world are nothing more than the issues of sensuality and defilement. We ordained people must turn our backs on them. As those who turn their backs on this worldly trivia, we nurture our responsibility as ordained people in the correct and proper manner. Samma Sankappo, the thought of getting out from sensuality, is right thought. This is the path, the way to enlightenment. This is the way of path and fruit. And now I'm going to read from Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Sixes, Sutta 55, and this is Sona. And of course, many of you know Ajahn Sona. He's named after this Sona because this Sona was a musician, and Ajahn Sona was a musician. And this Sona is practicing in the cool grove known as the Sitavana, and Birkin is also the Sitavana. So I wasn't able to find the actual story of the backstory of Sona. It's located in the Vinaya, but I can briefly give a condensed version here before reading the sutta. Is that Sona was from a very wealthy family, and he had a very delicate upbringing, and his hands and feet were so delicate that he had fine hairs growing out of the bottoms of his feet, and he was a lute player, like a troubadour, and very, very skilled musician, and then ordained with the Buddha. And actually then became the Buddha's disciple who was foremost in putting forth effort. And this is the story where it's very similar to what the Luang Por Baen story, where Sona is doing walking meditation and his feet are quite delicate, so he gets to the point where his feet start bleeding and he doesn't stop doing walking meditation. And this is where the sutta picks up. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Rajagaha on Mount Vulture Peak. Now on that occasion, the Venerable Sona was dwelling at Rajagaha in the cool grove. Then, while the Venerable Sona was alone in seclusion, the following course of thought arose in his mind. I am one of the Blessed One's most energetic disciples, yet my mind has not been liberated from the taints by non-clinging. Now there is wealth in my family, and it is possible for me to enjoy my wealth and do meritorious deeds. Let me then give up the training and return to the lower life, so that I can enjoy my wealth and do meritorious deeds. Then, having known with his own mind the course of thought in the Venerable Sona's mind, just as a strong man might extend his drawn-in arm or draw in his extended arm, the Blessed One disappeared on Mount Vulture Peak and appeared in the cool grove in the presence of the Venerable Sona. The Blessed One sat down on the seat prepared for him. The Venerable Sona paid homage to the Blessed One and sat down to one side. The Blessed One then said to him, Sona, when you were alone in seclusion, didn't the following course of thought arise in your mind? I am one of the Blessed One's most energetic disciples, yet my mind has not been liberated from the taints by non-clinging. Now there is wealth in my family, and it is possible for me to enjoy my wealth and do meritorious deeds. Let me then give up the training and return to the lower life so that I can enjoy my wealth and do meritorious deeds. Yes, Bhante. Tell me, Sona, in the past when you lived at home, weren't you skilled at the lute? Yes, Bhante. What do you think, Sona, when its strings were too tight? Was your lute well-tuned and easy to play? No, Bhante. When its strings were too loose, was your lute well-tuned and easy to play? No, Bhante. But, Sona, when its strings were neither too tight nor too loose, but adjusted to a balanced pitch, was your lute well-tuned and easy to play? Yes, Bhante. So too, Sona, if energy is aroused too forcefully, this leads to restlessness, and if energy is too lax, this leads to laziness. Therefore, Sona, resolve on a balanced energy, achieve evenness of the spiritual faculties, and take up the object there. Yes, Bhante, the Venerable Sona replied. When the Blessed One had finished giving the Venerable Sona this exhortation, just as a strong man might extend his drawn-in arm or draw in his extended arm, he disappeared in the cool grove and reappeared on Mount Vulture Peak. Then, sometime later, the Venerable Sona resolved on a balance of energy, achieved evenness of the spiritual faculties, and took up the object there. Then, dwelling alone, withdrawn, heedful, ardent, and resolute, in no long time the Venerable Sona realized for himself with direct knowledge, in this very life, that unsurpassed consummation of the spiritual life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the household life into homelessness, and having entered upon it, he dwelled in it. He directly knew, destroyed as birth, the spiritual life has been lived, what had to be done has been done, there is no more coming back to any state of being, and the Venerable Sona became one of the Arahants. Having attained arahantship, the Venerable Sona thought, let me go to the Blessed One and declare final knowledge in his presence. Then he approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, and sat down to one side and said, Bhante, when a bhikkhu is an arahant, one whose taints are destroyed, who has lived the spiritual life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached his own goal, utterly destroyed the fetters of existence, and become completely liberated through final knowledge, he is intent upon 6 things, on renunciation, on solitude, on non-affliction, on the destruction of craving, on the destruction of clinging, and on non-confusion. It may be, Bhante, that some venerable one here thinks, could it be that this venerable one is intent upon renunciation on account of mere faith? But it should not be seen in such a way. A bhikkhu with taints destroyed, who has lived the spiritual life and done his task, does not see in himself anything further to be done or any need to increase what has been done. He is intent upon renunciation because he is devoid of lust through the destruction of lust, because he is devoid of hatred through the destruction of hatred, because he is devoid of delusion through the destruction of delusion. It may be that some venerable one here thinks, could it be that this venerable one is intent upon solitude because he is hankering after gain, honor, and praise? But it should not be seen in such a way. A bhikkhu with taints destroyed, who has lived the spiritual life and done his task, does not see in himself anything further to be done or any need to increase what has been done. He is intent upon solitude because he is devoid of lust through the destruction of lust, because he is devoid of hatred through the destruction of hatred, because he is devoid of delusion through the destruction of delusion. It may be that some venerable one here thinks, could it be that this venerable one is intent upon non-affliction because he has fallen back on the wrong grasp of behavior and observances as the essence? But it should not be seen in such a way. A bhikkhu with taints destroyed, who has lived the spiritual life and done his task, does not see in himself anything further to be done or any need to increase what has been done. He is intent upon non-affliction because he is devoid of lust through the destruction of lust, because he is devoid of hatred through the destruction of hatred, because he is devoid of delusion through the destruction of delusion. He is intent upon the destruction of craving, because he is devoid of lust, hatred, and delusion. He is intent upon the destruction of clinging, because he is devoid of lust, hatred, and delusion. He is intent upon non-confusion, because he is devoid of lust, hatred, and delusion. Bhante, when a bhikkhu is thus perfectly liberated in mind, even if powerful forms cognizable by the eye come into range of the eye, they do not obsess his mind. His mind is not at all affected. It remains steady, attained to imperturbability, and he observes its vanishing. Even if powerful sounds cognizable by the ear come into range of the ear, even if powerful odors cognizable by the nose come into range of the nose, even if powerful tastes cognizable by the tongue come into range of the tongue, even if powerful tactile objects cognizable by the body come into range of the body, even if powerful phenomena cognizable by the mind come into range of the mind, they do not obsess his mind. His mind is not at all affected. It remains steady, attained to imperturbability, and he observes its vanishing. Suppose, Bhante, there were a stone mountain without clefts or fissures, one solid mass. If a violent rainstorm should come from the east, it could not make it quake, wobble, and tremble. If a violent rainstorm should come from the west, from the north, from the south, it could not make it quake, wobble, and tremble. So too, when a bhikkhu is thus perfectly liberated in mind, even if powerful forms cognizable by the eye come into range of the eye, and so on to powerful phenomena cognizable by the mind, come into range of the mind, they do not obsess his mind. His mind is not at all affected. It remains steady, attained to imperturbability, and he observes its vanishing. And it ends with verses. If one is intent on renunciation and solitude of mind, if one is intent on non-affliction and the destruction of clinging, if one is intent on craving's destruction and non-confusion of mind, when one sees the sense bases arising, one's mind is completely liberated. For a bhikkhu of peaceful mind, one completely liberated, there's nothing further to be done, no need to increase what has been done. As a stone mountain, one solid mass, is not stirred by the wind, so no forms and tastes, sounds, odors, and tactile objects, and phenomena, desirable or undesirable, stir the stable one's mind. His mind is steady and freed, and he observes its vanishing. And then I'll end with some verses from Luang Por Baen, which actually open this book at the very beginning. Sila, Samadhi, and Panya is the path. It is the training and it is the way. Where does this path lead? This is the path to knowing and seeing the mind clearly. The mind seen clearly is clean. It possesses brightness, uprightness, and malleability. When the mind is well established in brightness, uprightness, and malleability, then the mind is said to have Dhamma, for it has been trained by Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. When the time comes and the mind is well trained and well tempered by Dhamma, then the mind is said to be liberated. At that time, the mind becomes Dhamma and final release appears. Those verses make my hair stand on end whenever I read them. Any questions, comments? Kristen?
What was the last word of the last sutta that you read? He observes its finishing, vanishing.
Yeah, his mind is steady and freed, and he observes its vanishing.
One thing I've always found rich about the story of Venerable Sona is that people may or may not know that the word samma of the right effort and right mindfulness, all the samma, everything, that actually derives from a word meaning in tune. Like a properly tuned instrument is samma.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's many Ajahn Pasano and Ajahn Amaro Dhamma talks in the past. Samma, in tune. Well-tuned view, well-tuned thought, well-tuned behavior.
Just think over the word samana as well. It's the same root. Yeah.
Samana is rooted in one who exerts effort.
I appreciate the Luang Por Baen reading, and just to add in, Luang Por Pasano during a Q&A session, he was asked about the success of Abhayagiri and having indigenous Sangha, and he gave a long answer, but part of it was, so just to put that reading in context, was that he said that Westerners, if there's too much of an emphasis, there needs to be striving, but if there's too much of an emphasis on it, then the words he used, there's a tendency for them to tie themselves up in knots and get neurotic, as in a contrast, I guess, to Asians and how they would hold this sort of thing.
Yeah. There's a story with I was, with Luang Por Pasano, I had gone up Ukiah Alms Mountain and was noticing, how, it was a rainy day, kind of like the ones we have now, and I noticed how I was sort of really working hard to avoid that rain and cold, at every possible opportunity I'd be avoiding it. And I thought after the meal, I'm really avoiding that rain and cold. What if I were to, sort of intentionally go into it? So, okay, maybe before Patimokkha I'll just, it's not raining now, but maybe it'll rain, maybe it won't. I'll just put on some work clothes and go out and do walking meditation. And so, I got my work clothes on, and then I was about ready to go, and I thought, maybe it'd be good to ask Ajahn Pasano about this first. So I went into the office and explained my plan to Ajahn Pasano. And he told me, basically, Kachana, if you do that, you'll catch cold and won't be able to practice. It's good to observe that. It's good to observe that whinging, but good to pay attention to that. But no need to go out there and walk in the rain. So I put my regular clothes on again.
It's also good to know that monks who have done that kind of practice, like in the really old school Thai forest ajahns, they were already at a point where they were experiencing incredible peace and joy. It's not like they were, like, I think Luang Por Baen, it was good that he made this point. Like, he didn't do it to make his feet bleed. It's like, I'm going to go make my feet bleed. I'm going to do walking meditation until my feet bleed. But that was a byproduct of him not stopping until he got to his goal. And he probably intuited that he was close before starting or something. But sometimes you do run into, like in Thailand, you'd be on Tudong or something, you'd run into a monk who won't stop doing walking meditation. He won't even stop to go to the bathroom or anything, and he ends up being completely crazy. So it has to be done with the right attitude, and in tune. It has to be in tune.
Yeah, what you're talking about also reminds me, it's like sometimes the language around right effort can be just around like how little or how much, and that's an important distinction, sort of an important scale to be paying attention to, but also like it's not just like too little or too much, but like you're saying, like the energy behind it, or like what one is seeking to get out of, or like it's like what one's goal is, or sort of, that energy behind it can have. To me, I found paying attention to that is more difficult and usually more important than like sort of like the number of hours or that type of thing. So, and like this one Ajahn that Luang Por Baen was talking about, like that was an extreme amount of effort that he was putting in, but that was sort of like just right for him, given that the motivation or the energy behind that effort was pure, or was appropriately channeled or something like that.
Yes, I thought it's kind of good to put out there to know about this kind of stuff, because it does come up in the suttas, this kind of like, let only my skin, sinews, and bones remain, and things like that, let blood dry up, and we might think like in a fit of extreme inspiration, think like, okay, I'm gonna do it, and then the more common experience is someone tries that kind of thing, and then the whole Sangha is then really burdened for the next few months, with all the having to like fix all the problems.
Yeah, it just reminds me too, like right effort, is really all about increasing wholesome states of mind and decreasing unwholesome states of mind. And that has to be your benchmark, is whatever level of striving I'm doing, is it getting results that are either really actually decreasing unwholesome states of mind or increasing wholesome states. So you adjust your level of energy behind it based on the results you're getting over time.
I'm curious if Ajahn, maybe if you'd be willing to ask Ajahn Sikh his reflections on right effort and kind of what he's found in his practice.
Ajahn Kap, some Vayamo, Kwam Pak Pien Chop, Ajahn Mi Kwam Kit, right? Ajahn Mi ทำอย่างไรบ้างครับความเพียรเป็นยังไงก็ตามความเพียรเพราะว่าอ่านหลวงปู่แบนเล่าเรื่องให้ฟังเป็นเดินจงกรมแล้วก็เดินจงกรมถึงเลือดออกจากเท้าแตกก็เลยเริ่มเคลือบเคือนหัวเข่าแตกมือแตกก็เลยแต่ว่าเห็นว่าต้องสมดุลด้วยก็ไม่ให้ทุกคนทำอย่างนั้นแต่ว่าต้องให้สม่ำเสมอครับ ก็ฉันมีความคิดอะไรจิตตภาโลทาง
ก็เหมือนเราทานข้าวนะแล้วก็ต้องดูกำลังตัวเองท้องเราทานท้องคนแต่ละคนก็ไม่เหมือนกันนะแล้วทานข้าวก็การฝึกใหม่ๆก็ต้องดูกำลังของตัวเองแต่ว่าถ้าฝึกได้แล้วมันจะมีกำลังมันก็จะเพิ่มขึ้นความเพียรมันจะเพิ่มขึ้น
It's different for everybody. Energy, like I explained, what reading we did a little bit, and it's just. But once you find what's works for you in terms of putting forth effort, then you try to increase it little by little as time goes on, and then you sort of increase your threshold and make it more and more. That's all. And maybe one day it'll increase to that ultimate point.
ถ้าทำความเพียรถ้ามันถึงแล้วมันจะอยากทำของมันเองคือมันหมายความว่ามันจะดันมันก็จะฝืนนิดหน่อยแต่ว่ามันถ้าทำไปแล้วมันจะมีความอยากที่จะทำคือมันจิตมันจะมีความมันจะทำไปโดยอัตโนมัติไม่ใหม่มันจะฝืนนิดหน่อยมันจะทำไปทำไมความเพียรไปทำไมทำไม่มีประโยชน์อะไรแต่ว่าทำไปแล้วมันจะเกิดโอ้นี่มีประโยชน์มันจะเพิ่มความเพียรที่มันจะทำของมันเอง
It's like at first we might feel like it doesn't the mind might say, like, why should I put forth effort? I don't think it'll really have much benefit. But then you have to actually have that experience of putting forth effort, and then the mind knows how beneficial it is, and then it starts to become more automatic when the mind actually sees the extreme benefit of putting forth effort in the practice, and then you'll do it a bit more automatically. But first you have to pressure yourself and go against the desires in order to get to that effort at first.
เราทานข้าวไม่ต้องทานเลยเราทุกคนก็ทานข้าวก็เมื่อเราทำความเพียรก็มันจะเหมือน
It's like eating. You don't have to ask everyone, is this useful? Is this good? Everyone knows already. So it's like once you learn about the benefits of effort, then it's exactly the same as that. You already know that it's just automatic, that it works. Yeah.
I'm curious, do people feel like you need to go to an extreme to then find the middle path?
People might feel that. Yeah, people might feel that.
I would say that. I would think that. I don't know if you have to kill yourself on the walking path, but I think you have to know for yourself. There's an old, I don't remember what the quote is exactly, but an old William Blake quote about knowing what's too much and what's too little. You have to know for yourself, and how else would you possibly know? I mean, maybe you're such a faith type that the teacher will tell you just do this much and you can do it. But for myself, I'm not that way. I would think so.
It's like Venerable Sona. He was too much effort. He was the foremost in energy, and then the Buddha having to say, look, get it in tune here, and it was incredibly helpful for him to give him the simile of the lute, And that simile actually came up for the Buddha himself while he was striving as well. He had that thought about a lute and tuning it when he was near the very end of his practice.
As opposed to just to have one more comment, it's, unless you've got already a lot of discernment and wisdom and can see exactly right from the, point you're at, what's just right, then most of the time that people are hesitant about pushing or experiencing maybe an extreme is out of fear, out of fear or anxiety, and that fear and anxiety itself is an obstruction. Sometimes you kind of have to, within wise boundaries, and then not, you have to be realistic that you have to push those.
Does the Sangha have to face the repercussions of your overaction for you to find the extreme, to find the middle?
No, we don't want it to reach the point of breaking, where, and it usually happens when somebody doesn't have a teacher. If you have a teacher, it usually doesn't happen. But you hear these horror stories of people going to Burma and just practicing in these meditation centers and being really ardent. And then I've heard many stories, not just a few, but there's many stories about, and specifically Westerners, permanent psychosis, and you can never go back from that. So you don't want it to reach that point. But, that's when the effort is mixed with wrong view, wrong thought. And, that's why the whole path has to be in balance.
That's a good point about the benefits of being in community, so that there are people who can help you put on the brakes if you need to.
And, it does, Luang Por Baen's monastery, there's monks there who, Luang Por Baen is an amazing teacher, so he guides them, but even still, he has really ardent monks who get stuck in various ways. Even recently, there was a monk there, I guess, who kind of couldn't come out of samadhi. He would sort of do all his duties, and very good monk, but he's just sort of what they call stuck in samadhi, where and this is recent. This is a few years ago or something, and so he would do his duties, his sweeping, or they have chores, just like here they have their chores that they do, and once he was done, he would just go back to his kuti and just sort of completely 12 hours straight, and then once it was time for his next duty, he would kind of go do it, and then but he was kind of stuck in that state, so having to sort of get some teachings or develop some wisdom as well. But that's not that bad in terms of that monk probably has pretty good right view, and he's not going crazy or anything, but he's just sort of that's just where the minds go. Or Ajahn Tate, who was stuck in samadhi for 20 years and didn't believe Ajahn Mun. When Ajahn Mun told him to contemplate the body, and Ajahn Tate said, what do you mean? I don't have any lust. Why do I need to and Ajahn Mun kept telling him, no, you need to contemplate the body, contemplate the body. He's trying to get him out of his samadhi, out of his being stuck in samadhi, and develop the wisdom to go further.